As the incomparable Maya Angelou's poem said, "But still, like dust, I'll rise." My name is Maheen Chafiabadi, and I am a candidate for the Positive Psychology Resilience course Master Coach program, which involves the Positive Psychology Resilience course. I couldn't find a better quote to represent everything that is resilience. And so with that, I will jump into the material. 3 key learning points from the Positive Psychology Resilience course within the Positive Psychology Master Coach program for me are as follows. Grounded optimism is absolutely a foundation for me, and while I have found myself to be an optimistic person throughout my life, understanding that there is an actual proven way to utilize my self-reflection and gain power and control and a way forward from my past experience is extremely powerful for me. And the importance in grounded optimism is actually the focus on the future and what I'll do differently versus what I've done wrong and berating myself. So where I have frequently in the past been someone who reflects, oftentimes I've gotten stuck in the space of ruminating and not moving forward. Understanding that grounded optimism is all about using what we know to move us forward is key. It's really about analyzing the past learning and successes and failures and applying those to current situations. Next up is facing fear. This is actually a very recent learning for myself personally. In the past few years, I came up against some difficult times. I was laid off from a job, and while it certainly wasn't the first time in my life that I had experienced a kind of unexpected difficulty, it had been some time, and I found myself sort of stuck and very fearful of what might come next. So understanding that facing fear, the operative word being facing, is the most important. Fear will always happen, and sometimes we just have to do things feeling fearful. Ways to combat that, or to support ourselves through those moments where we're feeling fear, is by building a strong social network. And throughout my adult life, I have emphasized this when I speak with friends and family who I know are going through challenging times. While I like to be a shoulder for someone to lean on, I also strongly believe in the power of a web of social support around ourselves so that we can lean on many different people at different times. Something I wanted to share here is also that Bracho's vulnerability and sharing his personal stories throughout the course really made it easy for me to connect with my own personal stories and really tap into how I have learned to face fear in my own life. And it's really a nod to the fact that the power of sharing our individual stories can help someone else. And so potentially as a coach, there's really an option to share our stories as it pertains to each individual coaching session. Betty Kempa, who is a coach of coaches and one of my favorites, said, "If there's a little bit of fear, you're going in the right direction." I couldn't think of a better quote to encapsulate that key learning point for me. And the third learning point that I want to share with you is emotional flexibility. The acronym FAIL, First Attempt in Learning, is an amazing learning point for me. Throughout my adult life, I have definitely struggled with perfectionism, and I have been learning that accepting the fact, telling myself up front, acknowledging that I need to fail, that I need to try things and do them wrong, will help me get better and better. I also wanted to weave in here this idea of neuroplasticity, reminding ourselves that we are learning and we can learn can actually help this process as well. And Finally, really finding lightness and humor whenever we can help relieve some of the stress and anxiety that we feel when we're learning, as the actual act of learning is one of the most difficult feelings for humans to go through. This quote by Khalil Gibran encapsulates this feeling for me. One may not reach the dawn save by the path of the night. When we talk about applying what we've learned, I want to start by saying, while I have not been a coach, I do have 15 years of experience managing people in the workplace. And in the last 8 years, I have shifted my managerial style into a coaching or a seek to understand approach, which really means asking questions so that I can garner an understanding of that person's perspective of the challenge at hand. I began this approach about 8 years ago when I was getting my master's degree in organization development and learning about coaching in general at that time. Another point is the fact that having a role model can really help individuals to increase their resilience. So someone who maybe came up in a socioeconomic manner that was extremely challenging could find a positive role model who helps them achieve beyond what they grew up in. And I like to ask folks that I'm managing, who do you know that does this thing really well? So when someone comes to me and they're struggling, this is the question I ask them after we talk about the problem. And then it's really about connecting this person who's struggling with the one that they believe is doing it really well, or that I know that is doing it really well. And that peer-to-peer mentorship can really boost a person's confidence and therefore their resilience. I mentioned this in the workplace, but it's very, you can easily see how to apply that to life in general as well. And then I also want to offer this piece about forgiveness. Forgiveness is key to shedding that extra weight that we tend to carry on our shoulders. And forgiveness is not about forgetting or allowing people back into our lives when they've harmed us. It's about understanding that what they did to us no longer has power over us. So letting that go. And this book by Dr. Fred Luskin is fantastic. It's called Forgive for Good. I frequently recommend it to anyone in my life that I care about or who I come across who seems to be really carrying a burden of any maybe kind of hate or even just dislike or regret and so on. Through the conversation, if it seems like an appropriate match, I frequently reference this book. And this is one of my favorite poets who said, "These mountains that you are carrying, you were only supposed to climb." You can see at this point that I really like to tell stories through, tell presentations through impactful quotes. Next up are my recommendations for others who are taking this course or about to take the course, or how to use the course material. So really get clear on why the client has come to you. Ask a lot of open-ended questions, be curious, and some examples are, what's alive for you right now? And what else? It's as simple as that. I do want to note that the client should be talking more than the coach is talking in the session. And on the same line of asking questions, I have several links here, one of which is mine and two of which I actually got from one of our colleagues, Karim Shetta. So thank you for sharing these, Karim. They were a really welcome addition to what I'm starting with here, which is motivational interviewing. So for me, motivational interviewing is key, and it's something that I have studied previously. Motivational interviewing is very much about encouraging change talk through evocative reflective questions and summary statements, meaning that the client actually begins to find an intrinsic desire to make their own change. Motivational interviewing is both summarizing and reflective listening, and those are techniques used to encourage a shift in energy, as well as allowing the coach to gather more information and for the client to share more information. And then these other two links here, as I mentioned, are essentially lists and lists of questions to ask and guidance as to how to frame up your time with a client. And last, I want to say it's so important to understand that we cannot solve everything in a day. It took the client so many days, weeks, months, years maybe to address the issue or recognize that there is a challenge that they want to address. And we're certainly not going to resolve it in one day. So we need to be patient and mindful of the client's pace. Use active listening and paraphrase back to them what you hear so that you can establish trust and shared understanding to start. And finally, course benefits, I would say, are as simple as this. Understanding that people are resilient and can build resilience is key. Learning techniques to do these things is the overarching theme, and by employing some techniques that work for each of us, we give ourselves a greater opportunity at finding ourselves somewhere on the higher end of the happiness continuum. So with that, I say thank you so much for your time, and I welcome with open arms your suggestions and comments.